let's do a little bit of handicapping quickly if we could. It just off the top of your head, Cliff. Let's start with Georgia. If black voters do what they're supposed to do in Georgia and show up and vote, and even to the point, I mean, we know there's going to be the suppression. So we've got to overvote. That don't mean large all. That means more of us turn out than ever. That means us voting twice at a time. I know folks get that twit. Mark said overvote. But if we do what we're supposed to do, can't we pick up those seats in Georgia?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're both winnable, right? I think, part of it depends on us doing what we have to do. Part of it depends on that voter suppression issue. Part of it depends on some of these candidates, right? Because, they got to do their part, right? Like, you got to make it a little bit easier for us to talk to our folks and get them excited. And so, some of these candidates, we really need them to step up and, deliver in a different kind of a way. But I believe if everything falls in line, if we do our work, if the candidates at least give us a fighting chance, right, to talk to our folks and be able to deliver a message about how it's about us and our issues and to be able to do so with integrity, if that happens, and if we get the kinds of resources that is going to be necessary to fight against this voter suppression, I believe both of these Georgia seats are going to be doable. And the second one is a really critical one, because that second one is the open seat. It's a jungle primary. That race is probably going to spill over into January, right? Because you got 2 months after the regular election before you have the runoff. And at that point, literally, depending on what happens with the Senate seats in the rest of these states and Kentucky and South Carolina, at that point, that seat will be absolutely critical, and all eyes of the country will be on Georgia.
Wait a minute, you mentioned what some of these candidates need to do. Who ain't doing what they're supposed to do? And what are they preventing us from doing? If you want to name that.
Well, we got
Mark trying to see. Mark trying to start something. See that?
Right. I'll say
this. Call him out.
Because we will call him out now.
Yeah,
so
we don't need no.
I'm gonna say that. No, I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna need John Ossoff to come harder than he came when he ran for Congress.
Right.
I'm gonna need him to be a little bit different than he was when he ran for Congress. I'm gonna need him to address our issues a little bit differently than when he ran for Congress, right? And so we see what could happen, because he ran, he lost. Lucy McGrath ran and she won, right? So one of these things is not like the other, and so I'm gonna need him to bring a little something different if he's really gonna expect black voters to just come out and save the day for him. Because I'm not gonna lie to my folks as I try to mobilize our folks. We're never going to tell a lie.
That's right.
Is Lucy going to be okay, LaTosha?
I think Lucy is going to be okay. Lucy has one of the things that she's done, they make her fight for her, but she's a fighter. But one of the things that she's done is she has built a really broad-based coalition. She has a core group of black voters, a base of black voters, but she has a sizable white voting population in that district. I want to remind people the seat that she holds is the same seat that Newt Gingrich held, right? Mm-hmm. So people need to understand how extraordinary that is. She has that seat, but she has a group of women in that area who have been, some of them actually, at my understanding, have voted Republican in the past, but they are very, very concerned about the police and the gun violence issue in the schools. And so as they were activated and working around that, what she has been able to do is to build a broad-based coalition in her district of people that believe in her and believe in her integrity, particularly in leadership, in her integrity and her leadership around the ending the anti-gun violence.
No, white women are abandoning Trump in the suburbs at the polls say at a higher rate than white women overall are divorcing their husbands. So, I mean, that's important. Kentucky, you got McGrath. The brother made a good run for it. I think he probably turned on too late. A little more time, he probably would have won that. So is Mitch McConnell gone? I mean, we can make a difference there too as black voters in Kentucky, right?
Definitely. And LaTosha and I were in Kentucky. We were in Louisville just a few weeks ago for that election. We were in, and I know a lot of your watchers and listeners will know that in Jefferson County, Kentucky, where Louisville is, where most of the black voters are, there was only one polling place for over 600,000 voters, right? Now, it was a mega polling place, whatever, granted that, but one polling place, which creates a whole set of issues, including that we were there at 6 o'clock when they closed the doors. That's an issue in and of itself, right? They need to change. If they really want to get rid of Mitch, they're going to have to change those hours, right? Because closing your polls at 6 o'clock is a recipe for disaster. But we were there when they closed the doors in people's faces, and we helped lead the chance of open the door. In that critical moment when they first closed the door, you can see it in people's eyes where some people were thinking, what am I going to do? Do I just turn around? Oh, I guess I got to leave. Like there was that moment where, there was some resignation that, oh, it is what it is. And so we helped lead the chance of open the doors to let folks know you demand that your vote be counted. And it was really moving that, one of the sisters that asked us to come there, because we never go a place unless we're invited, right? We learned that from the civil rights movement. And one of the sisters that asked us to go there, she's the dynamic sister, president of the Louisville Urban League. Before we left, she said, "I am so glad y'all came because y'all helped give folks courage." Yeah. And that meant the world to us, right? And the fact that those doors eventually did open so that folks got to cast those votes was really important. And so with all that said, if that same energy, right, and the folks that got ignited for that campaign, and you're right, he did start a little bit late. If he had a couple more weeks, just a couple more, heck, maybe even a couple more days, I think he could have pulled it out. But again, this is another one of those examples where what's her name, McGrath,
right?
He got to come harder than just talking about
That's
being
right.
And address our issues in this moment, like Booker will. I mean,
right.
I think this is not the time for safe, moderate white politicians. I mean, Joe Biden is about to pick a black woman.
That's right.
He gets it. He didn't say, "Well, I ain't gonna pick no black woman." He gets it.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't they?
Mm-hmm. That's
well,
right. No,
I will say this, that at the end of the day, she has a great opportunity, because we all, the question at every discussion we had is, when are y'all going to arrest the murderers of Breonna Taylor?
That's right.
And so at the end of the day, we need to hear that coming from her lips. We need to hear her put that kind of pressure on it. So if she wants to deliver something, she got it right in her hands right now.
That's right.
So 2 more. Can Doug Jones keep his seat? Mm-hmm. A lot of the white posters you hear from are saying no. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of demographics and disproportionality of political power, doggone, when can we win that seat in Mississippi? Mike Espy, we got numbers. We need to show up.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, part of it is show up, but we also have to create a fair process. I mean, ultimately, what winds up happening, we keep putting the burden on Black folks to do more, right? Because folks steal it. And so ultimately, even if let's take Mississippi for an example, you've got an election official 3 weeks ago sending out an email saying, quote, the Blacks. She was concerned that the Blacks were registering and had these registration activities. So let's be honest about the institutional racism and the structural racism that is embedded in the process and those that are overseeing this process. And you shave a couple of votes here and shave a couple of votes there, because even in Mike Espy's last race, that was the highest turnout of Black voters, of progressive voters that any Democratic candidate had received. In the state of Mississippi, it is possible. It is certainly possible, but you're also working against different factors. You're working against the factor of, and I'm raising this because it becomes frustrating to me when the burden of democracy is placed on the back of Black folks. How much we got to carry? At the end of the day, Black people are now voting on par as our white counterparts. We're voting literally the same percentage as our white counterparts. And I even had a white guy that asked me, he said, I don't understand, since y'all did so much to fight for the white right to vote up at Harvard, fight for the right to vote. I don't understand why y'all only voted, why y'all don't vote. And I was like, well, that's really interesting, because actually Black voters voting on par with white voters, being that white people have received all the political, economic benefits of voting, why y'all ain't voting at higher rates. The bottom line is there's some fundamentally built into the system is not to support a full democracy of any of us. And particularly when you talk about Black voters. So I think Mississippi, we got the numbers right now to win in Mississippi. And so I don't think it's just a matter of voter turnout. We've got to do some structural change as well and hold people accountable who are standing in the way and are marginalizing and are suppressing our vote as well.
Yeah, a couple things on Mississippi. Not only did we see Mike Espy's race a couple years ago get higher turnout, higher votes than we had previously seen. Even last year in their state legislative races, there were a couple of surprises. In North Mississippi, there was a sister that won a legislative seat in a district that had previously been won by a Republican by something like 30-something points, right? But she was able to win this seat, right? And so we're seeing all throughout the state that little by little that we're seeing these shifts taking place, and counties are shifting, and legislative seats are turning. But to LaTosha's point, you know, there's a sister right now who's running in one of the Delta counties. She's running for like the election commission, and she's got a crisis right now. She may not be able to run because she's getting evicted from the land that she's on. She's having to move her home, move her trailer from the land that she's on. Has lived there for years, never had any problems, but all of a sudden now that she's running, she's getting evicted off the land. It's got shades of like Fannie Lou Hamer and many other people who were kicked off land, you know, who were sharecropping and got kicked off land as soon as they started trying to register voters, right? And so, but here's the interesting part of the story. The attorney representing the person who's kicking her off the land is the attorney for the other candidate in this race.
Unbelievable.
And so it's clear that there are political motivations in what they're doing to her. These are the kinds of things that, you know, in Mississippi, in rural counties, even in the cities, these are the kind of tactics that we're up against. And so that's why we try to tell people, look, you got to be willing to get in the dirt, right? You got to be willing to get in some of these places, in some of these states, and in some of these counties, or in the case of Louisiana, some of these parishes, but you got to be willing to get and go to some of these places where a lot of this stuff takes place in the darkness, outside of the light. We got to be willing to expose some of this. If you can't take seriously this system struggle in this Delta County in Mississippi, then don't come to us trying to get us to save the world, trying to save the country, right?
That's right.
In this one seat or this one state or whatever that you think is important. You've got to engage wherever our folks are. That's why we say Black voters matter everywhere.